The open sea stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast, calm expanse of water that glistened under the setting sun. The luxury cruise ship, the Serenity, sailed smoothly across the ocean, a floating palace of indulgence and relaxation. On board, passengers reveled in the pleasures of a journey meant to be the trip of a lifetime, blissfully unaware of the nightmare that was about to begin. Lucy stood on the balcony of her cabin, the cool ocean breeze playing with her hair. She was in her early 20s, her eyes bright with excitement as she took in the stunning view. This was her first cruise, a dream she had nurtured for years. It was made even more special by the presence of her older brother, Jack, who had planned the trip to give her a taste of adventure after the recent loss of their parents. Jack joined her on the balcony, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What do you think, Luz? Worth the wait?" Lucy nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was dipping below the water, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple. "It's perfect, Jack. I can't believe we're really here." The siblings stood in companionable silence, watching the day give way to night. But as the last sliver of the sun disappeared, the ship's lights flickered and then abruptly died, plunging the world into darkness. The only illumination came from the emergency lights, casting long, eerie shadows across the deck. A chill ran down Lucy's spine. What just happened? Before Jack could answer, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your cabins. We are experiencing a minor technical difficulty. The crew is working to resolve the issue. We apologize for the inconvenience." The calm tone of the captain's voice did little to ease Lucy's growing unease. "That didn't sound like a minor issue," she muttered, glancing at Jack for reassurance. Jack, ever the protective older brother, frowned. "I don't like this. Stay here, Lucy. I'm going to check it out." But Lucy wasn't about to be left behind. "No way. I'm coming with you." Jack hesitated, but knew better than to argue with his sister. "All right, but stay close." They stepped out into the corridor, where the silence was almost oppressive. Normally bustling with life, the hallways were now deserted, the air heavy with a tension that Lucy couldn't quite put her finger on. The eerie quiet was unnerving, and as they made their way toward the grand atrium, the sense of foreboding only deepened. When they reached the atrium, they found a few passengers huddled together, their faces etched with worry. An elderly man with a cane approached them, his voice trembling. "Have you seen any of the crew? We've been waiting here, but no one has come to help." Jack shook his head. "No, we haven't. Something's wrong. We need to find out what's going on." Determined to get answers, Jack led the way toward the bridge, with Lucy and a small group of passengers following closely behind. As they neared the bridge, the atmosphere grew even more unsettling. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, the room was in disarray. Papers were strewn everywhere, monitors flickered with static, and the air was thick with the scent of blood. Lucy gasped when she saw the trail of blood leading out of the bridge. Jack's face was grim as he followed the blood trail, leading them down a narrow corridor. The further they went, the more the horror of their situation became apparent. The ship was no longer a place of luxury and leisure. It had become a labyrinth of fear. Then they heard a low, guttural moan that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. It was the kind of sound that sent a primal shiver down your spine, the kind that told you something was very, very wrong. They turned a corner, and there it was a crew member, but not as they remembered. His skin was a sickly grey, his eyes vacant and clouded, and his movements were slow and jerky, as if he were a puppet on invisible strings. The man stumbled toward them, his mouth hanging open, emitting that same terrifying moan. Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lucy's hand and pulled her back the way they had come, shouting for the others to follow. "Run!" Panic spread through the group as they sprinted through the ship's maze-like corridors, the creature lurching after them. It was slow, but relentless, and every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into the ship's twisted innards. They finally burst into the dining hall, slamming the doors shut behind them. Jack and a few other passengers quickly began barricading the doors with tables and chairs, their hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. The dining hall, once a place of fine dining and laughter, was now their fortress, the only thing standing between them and the growing threat outside. As they caught their breath, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Lucy looked around at the frightened faces of the passengers huddled together. This was supposed to be a vacation, an escape from the troubles of the world, but now they were trapped on a ship filled with monsters, with no way out. "We need to know how bad this is," Jack said, breaking the silence. "We can't just stay here. We need to find survivors, and we need to get to the radio room. Maybe we can call for help," A few of the passengers volunteered to join Jack and Lucy on their dangerous mission, while the rest stayed behind to fortify their makeshift fortress. Splitting into two groups, they ventured back into the dark, silent corridors of the ship, every corner potentially hiding another one of those things. The further they went, the more the ship resembled a haunted house. The once pristine walls were smeared with blood, and the air was filled with a sickening stench that made Lucy gag. But they pressed on, driven by the hope that there might still be a way out of this nightmare. When they finally reached the radio room, it was in disarray, much like the bridge. But the radio was still functional. Jack hurriedly tuned the dials, trying to get a signal. After what felt like an eternity, a voice crackled, "This is an emergency broadcast. The Serenity is under quarantine. Repeat, the Serenity is under quarantine. No rescue is possible. Do not attempt to leave the ship. Remain in your cabins and await further instructions." The broadcast repeated, each word driving a deeper spike of fear into their hearts. They were on their own. "We need to get back to the others," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't stay here." Their worst fears were soon realized. As they made their way back to the dining hall, they heard the unmistakable sounds of chaos, furniture crashing, people screaming, and the growls of the undead. The barricade had been breached. Lucy and Jack arrived to find the dining hall in ruins. The zombies had broken through the barricades, and the few survivors were desperately fighting them off. But it was clear they were losing. "We can't stay here," Jack shouted over the din. "We have to get to the lifeboats." But the deck was a war zone. As they fought their way through the chaos, the true horror of the situation became clear. The ship was overrun with the undead, the passengers and crew transformed into mindless, ravenous monsters. Lucy clung to Jack, her heart pounding in her chest as they pushed through the throng of zombies. When they finally reached the deck, most of the lifeboats had been destroyed or were unreachable. But there was one left, hanging precariously over the edge. It was their last hope. "Get in," Jack shouted, shoving Lucy toward the lifeboat. She scrambled in, her hand shaking, as Jack fended off the approaching zombies. Just as one of them lunged at him, Jack kicked it away and leaped into the lifeboat. They managed to lower it into the water just as the deck was overrun. Drifting away from the Serenity, they watched as the ship faded into the distance, now nothing more than a tomb for the damned. But even as they put more distance between themselves and the ship, their relief was short-lived. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Lucy noticed something on the horizon. "Jack, look!" Another ship was approaching, its silhouette growing larger with each passing moment. Hope flared in their hearts. Maybe they would be rescued after all. But as the ship drew closer, that hope turned to dread. The ship was eerily silent, its decks devoid of life. And as it pulled alongside their lifeboat, they saw the name painted on its side. Serenity 2. Lucy's eyes widened in horror as the reality set in. The outbreak had spread. The nightmare was far from over. As they were pulled toward the ship, Lucy and Jack realized that their fight for survival had only just begun. The luxury of safety was a fleeting illusion, and in a world consumed by the undead, every moment was a battle between life and death. The open sea, once a symbol of freedom and adventure, was now an endless, inescapable prison. And so, as they were drawn into the shadow of the Serenity 2, they braced themselves for the horrors that awaited them. The nightmare wasn't over, it had only just begun.